This toxin acts strictly as an insecticide, and this toxin is also designed to be expressed throughout the entire organism. In this case, you'll see Bt toxin expressed from the roots through the trunk into the limbs and leaves of this organism 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the entire existence of this organism from cradle to grave and even beyond.
Already, crops genetically engineered to produce Bt toxin have unintentionally resulted in the evolution of Bt-resistant pests. The emergence of these superbugs has resulted in an increased use of even more toxic pesticides to try to control them.
But the ultimate tragedy is whenever you have something where it's like the pesticide is on all the time, it's in the crop all the time. So the only pests that are going to live through this experience are the ones that are a little bit resistant to it. And the only ones they're going to mate with are the other ones who are a little bit resistant to it. And so what you do is you breed resistance. You get superbugs where they can eat as much as they want and it won't bother them. And what's the result of that? This miraculous, naturally occurring pesticide that's relied on by organic farmers becomes useless in a very short time period because of resistance. And who benefits? Monsanto benefits because they've been charging very high prices for a short period of time, and everyone else loses.
Of all creatures in the world, insects are the most numerous and diverse, and play critical ecological roles like pollination, predation, and providing food for other species.
Producing Bt, specifically Bt trees, I think it's a very, very crazy idea, especially if the plan is to introduce them in areas where there is any organism that might exchange genes with these trees. Trees have life cycles of 50 years, 100 years, and so on, during which time we're going to see the tree putting out pollen, putting out the toxin through the root system again, putting out the toxin through every single cell in this tree, affecting insects and all these other organisms over this very, very long period of time.
Genetically engineered plants carrying the gene for Bt toxin have inadvertently killed non-target insects like monarch butterflies. This was an unanticipated consequence of gene manipulation. We've seen this before with DDT. In the excitement over the power of chemistry, millions of pounds of DDT were used. It wasn't until years later that people noticed that songbirds and eagles were disappearing, victims of biomagnification that concentrates DDT up the food chain. What the long-term consequences of toxic trees will be is unknown.
We know that the Bt toxin is leached into the root system, and we know that it alters the composition of the microbial community in the soil.
A forest that kills insects would be catastrophic, causing widespread disruption to the balance of nature in which insects are a crucial part.
Furthermore, Bt toxin is being exuded by the root systems of corn and, as we will see, trees. And what this means is that the Bt toxin is entering the soil system via the roots of the organism containing the toxin. Now, the bacteria in the soil system are actually picking up the toxin and transferring it throughout soil bacteria in an entire ecosystem. And this Bt toxin is now being expressed or produced and emitted through this bacteria in unprecedented and very unnatural amounts through soil systems. We're also seeing evidence of this Bt toxin moving through soil systems and being emitted into groundwater and surface water as well. And we're finding in areas where Bt toxin corn is grown in high concentrations, we're finding abnormally high amounts of Bt toxin, some 3, 4, and 5 times the amount that should be in water systems.
Growing evidence suggests that Bt crops can induce allergies and respiratory illnesses in human beings. In a recent study, Terje Travik, director of the Norwegian Institute for Gene Ecology, found evidence of diseases triggered by an immune reaction to Bt toxin in Filipino farm workers living near a field of genetically engineered Bt-producing corn. Because tree pollen can travel for hundreds of miles, genetically engineered trees could have a widespread impact on human health.
They're also genetically engineering fruit trees. Cornell University is very much involved in the genetic engineering of apple trees, and what is really frightening there is what we've seen with corn and other crop plants that are being genetically engineered is the possibility for allergic reactions by people. So there's a real serious threat to human health from these genetically engineered fruit trees because of the fruit going to market. It's not labeled. Nobody knows that it's genetically engineered. People eat it, and who knows what's going to happen. People just don't know what the impact will be on their human health.
Many papaya growers on the Big Island of Hawaii, faced with the rampant spread of ring spot virus, have planted genetically engineered sunup papaya plants. But now, 5 years later, these genetically engineered papaya have black spot fungus. Growers are forced to heavily spray toxic fungicides on their plants every 10 days to control the fungus.
GMO papayas are also susceptible to the black spot fungus, which means GMO farmers have to buy more costly pesticides. Some farmers are going out of business growing these papayas, as the price doesn't cover the costs.
Although the effects of genetically engineered papaya on human health are not known, it has been discovered that people can have a wide range of allergic reactions to certain proteins used to alter the fruit.
I'm concerned about GMOs for a couple reasons. First off, I'm concerned about the long-term effects of consuming foods that are derived from GMO organisms. Personally, I don't want to consume GMO foods. I'm also concerned about the long-term effects on birds and animals that consume GMO organisms.
Today I'll speak as a private citizen. Until further notice, I will always speak as a private citizen on this matter. Genetic engineering is more than just the transfer of a novel gene. The construct is the mutant gene, but it's linked to a vector, which is usually a bacteria or virus. It's also linked to a promoter, and it's linked to a drug-resistant marker. Now, the National Academy of Science has just released a report, and it says the potential risk of unintended side effects from GE foods, genetically engineered foods, is greater than from natural process. So it kind of alarms you to watch carefully for GE foods.
Large numbers of people are being subjected to a massive experiment without providing informed consent. At the very least, we should be able to see what food is genetically engineered so we can make our own choice.
We know there's a lot of experimentation going on all over this country in genetic engineering of fruit trees, for example. Whether allergic properties will pass on through that genetic engineering and people will buy an apple in the store that will have an effect on their health that will be completely unpredictable in advance.
Another trait being genetically engineered into trees is resistance to the herbicide glyphosate, known as Roundup. The trees will then be considered Roundup-ready plants. Roundup-ready plants and trees can be sprayed with Monsanto's Roundup and not be killed. The weeds around them, however, will die. This encourages widespread use of this herbicide.
Trees are being engineered to express a gene that allows them to be sprayed aerially en masse with enormous quantities of glyphosate. And glyphosate is the main active ingredient that we find in Monsanto's Roundup.